sleepers, January in New York brought vicious nights with a cold that could rarely be fought back with a bottle of brew or a few scavenged illegals. Some gave in and shuffled into the shelters to snore on lumpy cots under thin blankets or eat the watery soup and tasteless soy loaves served by bright-eyed sociology students. Others held out, too lost or too stubborn to give up their square of turf. And many slipped from life to death during those bitter nights. The city had killed them, but no one called it homicide. As Lieutenant Eve Dallas drove downtown in the shivering dawn, she tapped her fingers restlessly on the wheel. The routine death of a sidewalk sleeper in the Bowery shouldn't have been her problem. It was a matter for what the department often called homicide light. The stiff scoopers who patrolled known areas of homeless villages to separate living from dead and take the used-up bodies to the morgue for examination, identification, and disposal. It was a mundane and ugly little job, most usually done by those who either still had hopes of joining the more elite homicide unit, or those who had given up on such a miracle. Homicide was called to the scene only when the death was clearly suspicious or violent. And, Eve thought, if she hadn't been on top of the rotation for such calls on this miserable morning, she'd still be in her nice warm bed with her nice warm husband. Probably some jittery rookie, hoping for a serial killer, she muttered. Beside her, Peabody yawned hugely. I'm really just extra weight here. From under her ruler-straight dark bangs, she sent Eve a hopeful look. You could just drop me off at the closest transpo stop, and I can be back home and in bed in 10 minutes. If I suffer, you suffer. That makes me feel so loved, Dallas. Eve snorted and shot Peabody a grin. No one, she thought, was sturdier, no one was more dependable than her aide. Even with the rudely early call, Peabody was pressed and polished in her winter weight uniform. The buttons gleaming, the hard black cop shoes shined. In her square face, framed by her dark, bowl-cut hair, her eyes might have been a little sleepy, but they would see what Eve needed her to see. Didn't you have some big deal last night? Peabody asked her. Yeah, in East Washington. Rourke had this dinner dance thing for some fancy charity. Save the Moles or something. Enough food to feed every sidewalk sleeper on the Lower East Side for a year. Gee, that's tough on you. I bet you had to get all dressed up in some beautiful gown, shuttle down on Rourke's private transpo, and choke down champagne. Eve only lifted a brow at Peabody's dust-dry tone. Yeah, that's about it. They both knew the glamorous side of Eve's life, since Rourke had come into it, was both a puzzlement and a frustration to her. And then I had to dance with Rourke. A lot. Was he wearing a tux? Peabody had seen Rourke in a tux. The image of it was etched in her mind like acid on glass. Oh, yeah. Until, Eve mused, they'd gotten home and she'd ripped it off of him. He looked every bit as good out of a tux as in one. Man. Peabody closed her eyes, indulged herself with a visualization technique she'd learned at her free-ager parents' knees. Man, she repeated. You know, a lot of women would get pissed off at having their husbands star in their aide's prurient little fantasies. But you're bigger than that, Lieutenant. I like that about you. Eve grunted, rolled her stiff shoulders. It was her own fault that lust had gotten the better of her, and she'd only managed 3 hours of sleep. Duty was duty, and she was on it. Now she scanned the crumbling buildings, the littered streets. The scars, the warts, the tumors that sliced or bulged over concrete and steel. Steam whooshed up from a grate, shot out from the busy half-life of movement and commerce under the streets. Driving through it was like slicing through fog on a dirty river. Her home, since Rourke, was a world apart from this. She lived with polished wood, gleaming crystal, the scent of candles and hothouse flowers, of wealth.